Great. So tonight we are honored to have Kristi Perreault as our speaker. Kristi is a senior software engineer at Liberty Mutual Insurance, where her focus is serverless development and enablement. She has over 4 years of industry experience, holds an MS in electrical and computer engineering, and has learned, followed, and preached the best coding practices she knows through it all. When she isn't promoting women in tech and mentoring her dozens of new hires and interns, Kristi can be found in the mountains of Colorado, hiking, mountain biking, skiing, golfing, paddleboarding, and doing just about anything else outdoors. Kristi has been a member for Boulder, Denver for a while now, I think, and volunteer, and we're lucky to have you speaking tonight. So I will stop sharing and pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Jen. Get this up and running here. Okay. So full transparency, I actually did give this talk fairly recently. 2 weeks ago was the Women Who Code Connect Forward conference. Some of you may have checked it out or seen it. I will, since this is a smaller group, this will be a little bit more informal. I might skim over a couple things because I kind of built this out for like a 35-40-minute presentation. But I do have the recorded link finally for the session itself. So if you want the more formal version, I will be sure to share that out after the talk. So today I'm going to be talking about squeaky clean code, how to adopt some better coding practices. Kind of just a quick agenda. I'll do an introduction about myself and my company. I know there's some folks out there that might be looking to change jobs, so I have some stuff about that. We're going to talk about what clean code is, team standards and how to set up your environment, what good documentation looks like, which I know is everyone's favorite topic. We'll talk a little bit about code reviews, and I'll wrap it up with some success stories that I've had by going through these steps. Nope. So a little bit about Liberty Mutual. We actually have nearly 45,000 employees and 5,000 of them are in technology, and we're spread out across 29 different countries. We're one of the Fortune 100 companies, and we're also the 6th largest global property and casualty insurer. We've got a bunch of awards. So we were voted one of the best places to work in IT this year. And I will hit on some. We've had a perfect score of 100 for the Corporate Equality Index, and we have also been voted some of the best places to work for women, diversity, new grads, and LGBTQ equality. Since this is a Women Who Code group, I'll hit a little bit on some of our women in tech missions. So we have an internal group that I am a proud member of, where we support women in technology. One of the many work streams we have is called LEGIT, and it stands for Liberty Encouraging Girls in Technology. So this has been around for about 5 years, and our goal is to teach simple coding and inspire young girls to pursue the STEM disciplines. So we target the K through 12 level, and we've worked a little bit in the college level. So we've had over 350 volunteers teaching over 12,000 students. And I actually used to head up our Boston chapter for this, and now I've switched into a more virtual role for programming. So I've been pretty involved with this the last 3 or 4 years. In addition, we also have a WIT Summit program for freshmen and sophomore women in college. And they come to us for a 3-day summit, and then Liberty volunteers offer to mentor these students throughout their school year, and a lot of them turn into interns and new hires. So if you want some more information, I can throw this in the chat after as well. If you're looking for a job or anything, definitely check out lmi.co/tech, and I'm happy to share that afterwards. So as Jen said, my name is Kristi Perreault. I'm a senior software engineer at Liberty Mutual Insurance. I work in a serverless enablement and development team, specifically with the AWS cloud. I've been with Liberty for about 4 years now, plus a 1-year internship. I hold a master's degree in electrical and computer engineering with focuses in data analytics, cloud computing, and robotics, which I achieved from Boston University this past January. So it's almost been a year already. And I actually did this while working full-time over 16 months and the pandemic. This says Boulder, Colorado. I actually live in Erie, Colorado. I do all the outdoor activities, and I work permanently remote. So I want to make this piece a little interactive here since this is our JavaScript session. I put together a little TypeScript document here from the AWS CDK. So if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. I just want to encourage you guys to kind of throw in the chat some of the things that you might see right off the bat with what is wrong with this code right now. So I'll give everybody a minute to throw some things in there. It's totally okay if you don't understand what CDK is. It's just a cloud tool, which is super cool. If you want to learn more about that, definitely let me know. Yep, the tabs and the semicolons. Yep, variable names are a little different. Cool, yeah, these are great. So we'll talk about some of these things, and at the end, I will show you what a clean code example of this looks like. So clean code is defined as code that is easy to understand, easy to change, and follows good standards. And this is defined by Robert C. Martin, who wrote the Clean Code Handbook. And we're kind of going to dig into this a little bit more since I know these definitions are a little obscure and kind of high level. So I'll call out that clean code answers the questions what, how, and why. So if your code is clean, you're going to be able to say, you know, what is it that I'm looking at? What am I coding? How is it built out? Why is it built out in the way that it is? Why does this certain class correspond with this class? Why does this object work with this one? Or how does it work? So some of those questions should be clear to answer in your clean code. Clean code is also refactorable. So as we know in technology, things are changing all the time. So your code should be written in a way that it can handle these changes and these updates. So different dependencies, maybe even a language version update. It should be pretty easy to do these things in clean code. Clean code is also maintainable. So as you're building out features, new aspects, maybe building more microservices to interact with it, it should be easy to do this if your code is clean. As was apparent in the TypeScript example, clean code should be formatted and readable. I'll be the first to say I do not care if you prefer tabs or spaces, just pick one and stick with it through the whole way. It's going to make your life so much easier. And finally, clean code is easy to test. So writing unit tests, writing integration tests, or even manually testing this out in other environments should be easy to do with clean code. Probably more importantly, I do want to call out some of the things that clean code is not. So clean code is not just commenting everything. Just because you add a bunch of comments, it might make it easier to understand, but it's not going to hit all these other things that I just talked about with being refactorable, maintainable, answering some of those questions. It's also not just making your code look quote unquote nice. So just because you clean it up does not mean that the capabilities are going to be clean and it's going to be easy to interact with. And I will wrap up this with saying there's kind of a caveat. There's no one right way to do this. There's no big golden standard. I know this is a JavaScript chat, but I'm trying to be a little programming language agnostic here. So it's going to vary whether you're in JavaScript, whether you're in Python, whether you're in Java. So there's not really one right way to do this. These are just some of the standards and things I'm going to share with you today that have worked for me in the past. And I just want to pass on to you folks as well. So use these as a good starting point and kind of take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't. So the first thing is your team coding standards. So this is a standard document that your team will agree on and set for your code. For those of you that work in agile environments, this is different than a team working agreement. So a team working agreement would define how you run your ceremonies, how your team interacts, maybe how you want to handle working with the business side of your team. But a team coding standard should be a living document that outlines standards you set on your code specifically. So it's really for your dev team. And you'll want to revisit this pretty often. The most obvious times are when you gain or lose a team member, or do the same with a project. But I would recommend every so often, if your team does retrospectives, this is a good time to bring this up and revisit it. So just to sample team coding standards, this is something that my team likes to follow. I'll kind of quickly go through this. So have a recommended tool set, what kind of programming languages you want to use, what kind of plugins you want associated with that, and what kind of IDE you might want to use. So, maybe a popular one for JavaScript or TypeScript would be VS Code or the TS linter. Your branching strategy. So if you want to do feature branches, how you want to name them, maybe you just want to go from develop to your main branch. Your testing strategy, so how you want to write your unit tests, how you want to write your manual tests. Maybe you own a process that has a lot of common test scenarios across it, so you can document that here as well. Your language specific guides, so what version of JavaScript or TypeScript do you want to use? What kind of style guide do you want to follow? I found the Google style guide's been pretty helpful. And then kind of the format for your doc strings and your comment blocks as well. I would also recommend keeping your code review policy and your README outline in your team coding standards, but I'm going to talk about both of these things more in depth. So the next piece of this is your environment setup. I would highly recommend you do this as a team, and you try your best to stick to the same tools. You might be pretty opinionated or have a team member that's pretty opinionated and wants to stick with what they know. That's totally fine. I just recommend the same tools because it makes it really easy to help onboard folks, or to troubleshoot code, or when you're pairing, and you kind of avoid that, well, it works on my machine issue. Live code sharing is another really cool tool. If you haven't heard of this, it's basically like Google Docs, but in an IDE. So VS Code has a plugin for this called VS Code Live. And somebody just starts up a session and shares their email out with everyone. And then you can join the session together. So especially in this virtual world, it's a really great way to pair or to mob on stories. So if you haven't heard of it, I would definitely check it out, and you can include this in your environment setup. And finally, just make sure you're following your code standards. As you're going through the environment setup, you might find that something in your code standards doesn't line up, or it's different, or you want to change it. That's why it's a living document. So just make sure you're staying consistent across both things. All right, so documentation, everybody's favorite topic. So starting at the lowest level, we have our comments. So there's kind of two big ones. So one would be like the method level comments, and the other is like your line comments. So I find that method level comments or definition level comments are really useful when you have a lot of heavy logic going on, or it's something that needs a lot of clarity. So this could be in your service layers, it could be an API, it could be like a controller that you're trying to define. Basically anything where it's not exactly clear or there's a lot happening. I would say that, I have this note here, intuitive code shouldn't really need comments. So if you're naming things appropriately, if it's very clear what they're doing, if you're keeping them pretty small, which are all good practices to follow, then you shouldn't need to comment a ton. Especially if you have little utility or helper methods, it's very clear exactly what it's doing. Add two numbers, and you name it add two numbers. You probably don't need a comment to illustrate that. So this is kind of up to your discretion a little bit. Again, I just want to reiterate, don't comment everything and then say that it's clean, because in some cases it just makes it longer and a little bit messier. Readmes, on the other hand, I believe you should always, always, always include a README for your project. I don't care if it's doing the smallest, littlest thing. This is kind of like your home base for everybody. So it's for you, it's for other developers in your code, it's for community contributors, it's sometimes even for the business side, to understand what's going on in your space. You might have multiple ones, definitely a root level, but in some cases, I know with some of the cloud programming that I do, we deploy things in different stacks, and we like to call out what's in each stack. So sometimes we use other READMEs. I would also highly recommend that you follow a standard template for your README, which I will also share on the next page and go through kind of what we like to follow on my team. And don't be afraid to link out to other resources here. Definitely, like I said, use this as your home base. There's nothing more frustrating than having a lot of really great documentation and then developers or folks trying to look at this not knowing where to find it. So here's like a sample README that my team likes to follow. At the top, we will call out the project name and we'll include badges. So if you haven't heard of badges, they're just these little things that call out your build deploy status. You can put in your branch builds, you can put in all your different environments. You can even put in things like if you have open pull requests, and it'll just tell you the status of them, or in the case of pull requests, how many there are. So those are great to include at the top of your project as just kind of a quick point to check and see where the code is at. Below that, we include an overview. So this is just a high-level description of what your repository is doing. This could be 1 or 2 sentences. It could be several paragraphs, depending on how complex your project is. One of the things we like to do is also call out some of the key resources we're creating in this project. So if it's an API, if you have a database, we work a lot with Lambda functions in the cloud, so we call those out. Just a short description of what each thing is doing and maybe what it's named. So it's pretty clear right off the bat exactly what you're generating in this project or maintaining. Probably the most important thing is to have instructions on how to build and run your project locally. Even if you know you're the only one that's going to be here, there have been cases where somebody might be on vacation, where you step away from it for a while and you come back and you don't remember how to do it. And it's a good way to kind of keep up to date with what versions and things that you're running on here. So you'd want to list out exactly what your required installs are. For us, that tends to be like the AWS CLI, the CDK, the version of Python or JavaScript that you're running, and then link out to those resources as well. It makes it really easy for folks that are just getting started with your project to do a couple quick clicks, downloads right away, and they have everything they need right there. And then the actual instructions for how to build and run locally. So definitely just copy and paste those exact commands that you're running so that everybody can use it. And it is also very nice to just go in here and copy and paste whenever you're in here to run your commands, so you don't have to click through your command line window. Similarly, I would do the same thing with your tests. So write out the steps to run your unit tests. Maybe you have to change into a folder to run them, or you might be testing manually. So APIs is a great example of this. And this also kind of goes hand in hand with the endpoint documentation piece. So definitely call out exactly what endpoints you're trying to hit, and then what you would expect the request body to be and what you would expect the response body to be. We like to use Postman. I know Insomnia is another popular one, but we've even included like screenshots of exactly what the window looks like, so that there's no confusion and somebody can get up and going pretty quickly. And then finally, we just have a one-line like contributors section that lists out our team members, links to our team page in case folks have questions or there's something that's out of date or needs to be updated in the project. External documentation is kind of the last piece of documentation. This one is not always necessary. If it is, it could be like a wiki page that's explaining something more. It could be if you have like a Git book. We've also used MK Docs as another one. They're all just code generated documentation sites. Well-architected reviews are great to link out to as well. If you have any sort of diagramming, like lucid charts, or in security, there's threat models are pretty common. You can link out to all those things here. And as I said before, just make sure you're linking them so that your documentation isn't all over the place and it's all together. Okay, code reviews. So this one's my favorite one. The thing that I want to emphasize, and probably the number one takeaway from this talk, is that you should use code reviews as a learning tool. It's good for anybody who's junior all the way through your senior level. There's great things to learn from code reviews. I would encourage you to always just ask questions and have discussions. This one's a little bit controversial, but I believe that no comment is too small or too silly. When I started out on my team, I did not feel like I was qualified or knew enough about the code bases that we were working in to comment things. So I just got really nitpicky and I just picked out typos, comments that were off. If I had a better name for a variable or just a billion questions, I'd throw it in there because it gets you really comfortable with just putting yourself out there and commenting in code. And some of those things with the content and the context of what's happening, and more of the logical comments, will come more naturally over as you start to learn and you start to get more into the code. So don't worry about it too much in the beginning and just do what you can to kind of put things out there. If you're more senior, this is a great opportunity for you to explain why or how you did something. And it gets you practicing with kind of explaining your method to more junior folks and mentoring folks. So we open a pull request. Sometimes I'll go back in and say like, hey, just so you know, I did this way instead of this way because of XYZ. Or wow, I found this really cool new library I wanted to try out. So that's why I'm using it here. Here's a link to it if you want to check it out. So these just kind of get ahead of some of the questions and start generating some of the discussion in your pull requests. And finally, don't take things too personally. We actually have that in our team standards as a rule that you shouldn't take the comments in code personally. If things are starting to get a little heated or maybe misconstrued, highly recommend just hop on a call and talk about it. It's so much easier and more productive than like going through text sometimes because it can get misconstrued every so often. But we just know not to take everything personally. So wanted to include some real screenshots of some of our pull requests. So this first one, this is real. We had over 100 comments in one of our first pull requests as a team, which is absolutely insane. We do not do this all the time. I will say that not all of our pull requests look like this. This was a really large unit test refactor. And I was new to the team, and we also had somebody that was retooling and had just come out of a boot camp and was also learning. So we had some new team members on the team. So a lot of these will be my nitpicky comments. Some are just questions that just turned into really long discussions. But I will say it was a huge learning tool. I mean, when I looked up the screenshot for this, I knew exactly where to find it and what it was about because I had remembered it so clearly. Also have some like kind of just other screenshots with some good comments in here. So another thing that I forgot to mention is positive reinforcement's always a good one. It doesn't always have to be that something's wrong. You could just say, hey, I really like how you did this here. Some of these are my questions that I've asked. I'm not a TypeScript developer, so I have asked some funny questions. And just like some kind of commonalities, like, hey, I'll get this section filled out next time. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll add in these files. Along with that, though, I do want you to have some fun with it. We are known for putting memes in our pull requests. If this is not your team language, that's totally fine. But we have some kind of funny things that happen. So on the right here, one of my team members has a funny little third-person anecdote he wrote about using Java 8 back in 2019, which was pretty funny. And I've known to be kind of sassy on things like a dummy testing account. I was joking that it's my favorite account that we deploy to. So cool. So kind of to wrap up a little bit here, I do want to share that this stuff works. I have 3 different really clear examples of what I've done in the past. So a lot of those screenshots were from a database application that I created in the past in Java Spring Boot. And we actually passed this off to a team of folks that weren't developers to maintain. So this was network admins, DBAs, folks that aren't traditionally developers. And we passed it off in, I think, 2 hours. And this was a project that had about 20 repositories. But because our documentation was set up right, because we had all those steps for running, installing, and setting up in the Readme docs, they didn't have any questions. They were able to take it and run with it. And this application is actually still in use in our company today. And they're still actively building features out on it, and I almost never hear from them, which is absolutely unheard of if you've ever passed something off to another team. So that speaks a lot to our clean coding practices. Additionally, on my current team, we have a lot of kind of inner source, open source collaboration. So other folks in our company are welcome to contribute to some of our applications. And we've got nothing but positive feedback about that, because we include in our README docs exactly how we want you to contribute, and we show them exactly how we do our branching strategy, exactly how we do our testing, which makes it really easy on everyone, because customers aren't waiting on us for features, and they can contribute right away, and it can be done pretty easily and painlessly. And finally, we do a internal 24-hour hackathon every year. Normally it takes place in person in Boston. I think we're switching to virtual this year. But we joined as a team out of, I think we had about 40 or 50 teams the last time this was in person. And we followed these best practices over the 24 hours. And we actually won the Tech Excellence Prize for the whole hackathon. So this stuff works, and timing is definitely not an excuse, because we did it in 24 hours and still built out tests and documentation. So if you're still with me, I just had a little bit of bonus content. So one of the biggest questions or things that I hear about clean code is, this is all great, I agree with you, but like my team doesn't agree with you, or how do I get this prioritized with my product owner? Because I know that a lot of folks sometimes are dealing with putting out fires pretty constantly, or aren't in the unique position that my team's in, where we're developing a lot of applications from the ground up. So my three big things here are time, cost, and security, and they tend to be the three things that companies really care about as a whole. If you're doing a lot of these things up front, it is going to take a little bit of time, but the time and the money that it's going to save you down the road is huge. That one person that knows their one app super well and nobody else knows it, eventually they will leave, or that app is going to be passed down to somebody else, or it's going to have to be refactored. So doing this stuff up front may not be the most fun, but it's going to save you in some of those kinds of situations, or in the case of my database application, like the handoffs. It's going to make a lot of those things easier and more painless. Security is another big one here. Keeping on top of some of these things also is addressing a lot of your tech debt. And as you're addressing tech debt, you're going to make your applications more secure, because typically those updated versions, dependencies are going to include security patches or things that have been fixed in previous versions. So it will make your applications more secure in the long run too. So finally, I will show our previous example here, which I saw a lot of folks have called out. The spacing, the different casings, the curly braces. These are all awesome things to point out. And then the clean version looks like this. So this is what you get out of the box when you actually initialize a project with CDK, which I did see somebody called out. Yes, it is the Cloud Development Kit. It's a way to make cloud applications, develop cloud applications a little bit easier and right out of the box. So if you notice, yes, all of the cases have been cleaned up. I even took out a lot of those comments, because intuitive code should not need that many comments. Although it is definitely up to your discretion, especially as this class gets bigger, to add some of those things. Yeah, and just the alignment on the tabs and the spaces, the brackets, making sure those are in line, the spacing, making sure that those are cleaned up. You guys got most of them, so pat yourselves on the back. You're coding clean already. So just to summarize, make sure you create and follow your team standards. Do your best to document as much as you can, even though it is not the most fun thing in the world. Kind of as a cheat a little bit, the Readme template, if you have that documented somewhere, it is so easy to just copy and paste it for all your projects and to just change the project specific stuff. Chances are you're going to be working with a lot of the same tools, plugins, programming languages, so a lot of that will not change. So that will make your life a lot easier. Learn from your code reviews, no matter what level you're at, whether you're new, whether you're senior. It's a great place to kind of come together as a team and do some knowledge sharing. I attribute a lot of what I know to code reviews. And finally, we're developers. We do this because we love it. So just have fun with it, enjoy, be flexible, change things up. Like I said, take kind of what resonates here and try to apply it yourselves in your teams. And then I just have a thank you slide for some of my mentors at my company, and they have pretty much taught me everything that I know and have taught me my clean code practices. So I owe them a lot of this presentation. And if you'd like to keep connecting with me, I know this slide is a very terrible yellow. I did not have control over the conference colors. I'm very active on Twitter, so definitely give me a follow. I'll be doing some tech blogging. I share out other talks that I do like this, or feel free to email me. It's my company email, and I'm also on LinkedIn. It's just my name, so I'm pretty easy to find, or I'll be in the Slack channel. So that is all I have for you today, and I think we have some time to open it up to questions.
And Christy, we had two come in chat just the last couple of minutes. Oh, and there's another one. Oh,
okay. All right, so I answered the CDK question. the animal on the slide, I think, is a white monkey. Every time I look it up, I just search white monkey meme and it comes up. So if you're looking for it, you can find it there. By tech debt, I mean, anything that kind of piles up. So, as you're maintaining projects and going forward, it is really tough to just kind of get stuck in the feature development. The business always wants something more, or you want to always build something more on that. And then you kind of add up to what they call tech debt, which is like your dependencies fall behind. There's new stuff that's being released and you're not updating your code to go along with that. So by doing a lot of these clean code practices, you can hopefully try your best to stay on top of a lot of those things. One of the things my team likes to do is anytime we go back into a project to add a new feature or connect it to a service or something, we actually go through our dependencies list before we even start the feature and do as much updating as we can there, because it'll save us from doing big updates that might break things in the long run. Do you have any examples for when to leave comments in? Does commenting everything more apply to READMEs and run books? Yeah, so the README documentation is probably the biggest thing. I would much rather prefer somebody has a really robust README than a ton of comments. I don't know if I have anything specific. I got to be careful about what I share from my company for actual comments. I mean, the one example that I do have in here, you'll notice that I added a bunch of comments in here. Some could argue that some of these would be fine. It is a little bit of overkill because there's some easy things going on here, but it's definitely not the end of the world to have like a nice class level comment to explain what the whole thing is doing. It is kind of up to your discretion. I just don't want you to be every other line have a comment so that you have more comments than you do code in your projects. Hopefully I'm answering everybody's questions okay. Where would you recommend hosting the team coding standards? We have some of that stuff in our project README. Okay, awesome. So we use the Atlassian tool suite, which is like Bitbucket, Jira, and we use Wiki. So we have Wiki pages. So that's where we keep all of our team stuff, and we link out to that from our README documents so that they are still all connected, especially when we talk about that contributors section with our team members. If you don't have something that's internal to your team or internal to your company that you use for documentation, Gitbook's a really good one. It's just like another code repository that you create. And it's like all in Markdown, and then you just share it out, and then you have a web page and you can link out to it, and it's just your documentation. That's a good one. MK Docs is another popular one that folks use. But yeah, usually I just default to kind of wherever your company uses as their documentation, or if you're just an individual coding, like I said, Gitbook's a great one. Or just creating really robust READMEs or another document in your project, if that helps. As far as things in the clean code book, I will admit I actually have not read the whole thing cover to cover. I've just picked up small web pages here and there and some of the tips and tricks from my coworkers that roll up to that book. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that is really off base. I want to say that he writes that book from, I don't know if it's the Java perspective, but I think he does kind of keep one of the programming languages in mind. So I would kind of keep that in mind as you're reading through it, that it might not be applicable to all programming languages. But I totally admit I have not read that the whole book, so you're already doing better than me. Yes, I will post the Liberty Mutual job website in here as well. And I think that's every question. Jen and Jen, have I hit all of them?
Yeah, it looks like you covered all of them.
Oh,
We do have
okay.
a couple minutes. If anyone else has a last minute question, you can feel free to unmute and just go ahead and ask.
Oh, I accidentally shared that.
This was an awesome presentation. I think, yeah, it's really great overview of everything that we can do to kind of enhance both like your team's work, and then also if you're still just getting started and learning how to code, like building these practices in your own repos, like when you're building stuff on GitHub, like let me add a repo or a README just for myself, you know?
Yeah, right. It gets you in the habit of it too. I like, we have to be better at doing some of this stuff on my team too. I'm preaching it, and like I got to make sure that my team's staying up to date, and we're bringing stuff in more for our retros and things to review. That's a really good thing to bring up and kind of go through every so often, or picking a time once a quarter maybe to review it.
All right, I will stop the recording.